I'm Amy the Amazonian, and this is a video about Brawl. Brawl is a constructed format of Magic the Gathering first introduced in March 2018 in the article that you see behind me. This article, like this video, is going to talk about the rules and how you can play Brawl. In Brawl, your deck has a commander, which is a legendary creature or planeswalker that starts outside of your deck during the game, and also decides some things about your deck's building constraints. So in this case, you get to choose from any legendary creature or planeswalker that is available in Standard. But it's going to decide what colors you're allowed to put into your deck. For example, Tatsunari is a creature that has an ability that is both green and blue. You can also cast this spell for black. That means that its overall identity is black, blue, and green, commonly known as Sultai. You can put any of those colors into your deck if Tatsunari is your commander, whereas if Liliana of the Veil was your commander, you would only be allowed to put black cards in your deck. If you have a multicolored commander, for example, Greasefang, Okiba Boss, you could put black or white cards in your deck, or anyone's using both those colors in their identity, but you wouldn't be allowed to use a 3-color card that has those 2 colors and an additional color, as it would not fit within the color identity. Like the commander, the cards you put in your deck also have to be available as part of the standard rotation of sets. Right now I'm recording this in October of 2022, which means that these are the current sets legal and standard, and that dictates which legendary creatures and planeswalkers, as well as which cards I'm allowed to put into the deck. A couple quick examples of commanders and how you might want to synergize them would be something like Edgar, Charmed Groom. Edgar, Charmed Groom gives other vampires you control +1/+1, which means that it's good to put vampires in your deck. Another example would be Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. This card gives creatures you control +1/+0 and trample when you cast an instant or sorcery, so you have to make sure you include instants or sorceries. It's also good to have lots of creatures on the board so you can go wide and attack with that big buff. And for a commander like Joda, the Unifier, you would want to play a lot of legendary spells, mostly legendary creatures and planeswalkers. Joda the Unifier has an ability that makes all of your legendary creatures stronger, including himself, depending on the number of legends you have on the battlefield. He also has an ability where you cast a legendary spell with him in play, and then you reveal from the top of your library until you find another legendary spell of a lesser mana cost, and you get to cast that spell for free. This is a really strong and very popular commander right now. For this video, I'll be playing Katilda, Dawnheart Prime as my commander. That means my deck can include green or white cards, and I should build around one of her abilities, which is human creatures I control have the additional ability of tap and add 1 mana of this creature's colors. She's also able to put +1/+1 counters on all of my creatures. This rewards me for building up a large board of creatures and for playing humans. She also has the additional ability of protection from werewolves, which is just nice to have, because there's a lot of really strong werewolves out there. Here's a quick look at my Katilda deck. This deck, as I said before, is 60 cards, and I also wanted to point out 2 cards I've included in it, which are Command Tower and Arcane Signet. These are 2 cards which were made legal in Standard for their express purpose of Brawl. If you try to put these in another deck, they're not going to really do anything because you won't have a commander. Command Tower adds 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. It always comes in untapped. This is a really good piece of fixing for your mana base. It's also a common card, so it's really easy to craft and put into your deck. Arcane Signet, similarly, is fixing in mana that's based on your commander's color identity. It's a 2-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. So, if I'm looking to get more green and white mana in my deck, I should include both of these cards. And I did. My Katilda deck is a mix of cards that are very strong in her colors and cards which are just part of my humans tribal theme. For example, Sigarda, though not a human herself, makes other humans stronger, and allows you to get humans from the deck if you have Coven while you attack. I also have some humans that are very, very strong on their own, like Intrepid Adversary. Knight of Dawn's Light, Guardian of New Benalia, and a whole bunch more, including some werewolves. I know that Katilda is not a fan of werewolves in the story or on her card, but the Averbrook Caretaker on her front side is a human and is really, really good. Some of the good stuff cards I included in this deck would be something like Farewell. This is a board wipe. I only have one of these in the deck that allows me to exile artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or graveyards. I can choose from among those. I have Sanctuary Warden, which is this big flyer that generates card draw and tokens. And I also have the Wandering Emperor, which is a Planeswalker that has won me so many games of Magic, it's kind of absurd. As I mentioned before, this is a singleton format, so you'll see here I only have one of each card, with the exception of basic lands. For me, that's going to be plains and forests. You can only play basic lands that are a part of your commander's color identity, which in this case would be white and green. I also want to point out that there are some cards that are banned in Brawl, and Brawl does not share Standard's banned list. Though the same card pool of cards that are part of Standard rotation are legal, this is the only card that's currently banned in Brawl. Again, I'm recording this in October of 2022. When you're building your deck, if you're trying to figure out why a card isn't available to be put in your deck, it's either because it's banned, not part of Standard, or you just haven't put on the not collected filter. Those are some great ways to start when you're building your deck. Once you've built your Brawl deck in Arena, you're able to play it by clicking on the play button on the home screen, and then scrolling over to the right to this commander image. This is what this little symbol means. And selecting Standard Brawl. Then choose your deck and hit play again. As we get into the match, I want to point out some quick things. In this format, you start with 25 life. You can also take a free mulligan, meaning you can put back your original 7 cards drawn and draw a new 7 without a penalty, and also that your commander lives outside of the deck. I mentioned this before. If your commander dies, is exiled, or otherwise moves between zones, you can choose to put it back into the command zone instead of putting it into wherever zone it would go. This is important because this allows you to recast your commander, but each time you cast your commander from your command zone, you have to pay an additional 2 colorless mana. I mentioned it before, and I'm going to take advantage of that free mulligan. I don't like that I don't have white mana there. And hey, this hand looks an awful lot better. It's got white mana, green mana, and a good number of creatures in it. Our opponent is playing Zeotora, the Incinerator. This is a black, green, and red creature with flying that sacrifices creatures to deal damage and make treasures. She's very scary and very big, so we're going to try to play aggressively to get around that. Looks to me like we're going to want to play a creature here, so I'm going to play a Plains in the Sungold Sentinel. There's nothing for it to exile in any graveyard, so it just enters the battlefield and is a nice 3/2. Sorry, it's a dead 3/2. Our opponent cast Infernal Grasp and destroyed the Sungold Sentinel. I didn't get to do much with that human. But that's okay, I've got more creatures where that came from. Our opponent has thrown down Florian, Voldaren Scion, a vampire with First Strike, who generates card advantage based on the damage you dealt during and before combat. Now I'm going to throw my own creature down, Tauren's Fist of the Angels. This is a human with training, meaning it can get bigger when it attacks if it attacks with a creature with a higher power, that also creates human tokens. I don't want to block because their creature is bigger and first strikier than mine, and mine would just die. So they get to look at the top 3 cards of their library and choose to exile one to play this turn. They chose a swamp. That's good card advantage right there. The reason I played Tauren's is because I was hoping to generate some of those tokens and make them very strong with King Darien. Unfortunately, our opponent destroyed that creature like they destroyed the first. This is a good example of why not all playstyles match up that well against each other. But I've got more creatures where that came from. I'm going to play Sereth, the Viper's Fang. This is a 3/4 human warlock that gives other tapped creatures I control Death Touch, and untapped creatures Hexproof. Why am I playing this? Because this is a 3 power, 4 toughness, And these two are not as big. Sorry, Braid. Sorry, Florian. Body Dropper is pretty sweet, though. So they're going to sacrifice the Body Dropper, actually, to deal 2 damage to me and draw a card, because I do not want to sacrifice Sereth. Yeah, this is a 3/4, so they don't want to attack into it. I actually want this to be a little bigger, so I'm going to play King Darien and the Hopeful Initiate. I haven't played a land yet for turn, so here's the Radiant Grove. I'm going to pass my turn. King Darien is giving each of my other creatures +1/+1, and can be sacrificed to protect tokens by giving them hexproof and indestructible, and can also generate soldier tokens. It's pretty great. This is a creature that does a lot of stuff. I would actually consider making this a commander. It's a legendary creature, just like Katilda. Ooh, they're playing the Workshop Warchief, gaining 3 life. When this dies, they get a 4/4 Rhino. And they may want to sacrifice it to Zeatora next turn. I'm a little scared of Zeatora because she can deal damage to any of my creatures that don't have hexproof. And right now, that would be Sereth. I'm going to play the Busaijo Who Endures as a land. I'm not going to use its channel ability. And then I'm going to cast Katilda, my commander. This is going to allow all of these humans to tap for mana. And now, I think I'm going to play Serra Paragon. Serra Paragon lets me replay a permanent from my graveyard. Now, I have all this mana because I can tap these for mana, and I want to replay the Sun Gold Sentinel. And I'm going to use it to exile the Body Dropper from my opponent's graveyard. Go to combat, and do nothing. The Serra Paragon is also a pretty big flyer right now. Graveyard Trespasser is similarly going to exile from my graveyard, which means that they're going to exile Taurens and deal a damage to me. That's too bad. I was hoping to cast that next turn. They're Florian triggers, and they did have 1 damage dealt to me, or I lost 1 life to the Graveyard Trespasser. There was a Geothermal Bog on top of their library. Great, that's a good card for them to have. And they're going to pass through to the end of the turn. Now, this is a great draw. I got the Intrepid Adversary, which I'm going to cast. And then I'm going to use the ability of to pay mana to make it and all my other creatures bigger. So we're going to pay once, twice. I want to be careful tapping here. 3 times. 4 times. Now I have some really big creatures. I also have an 8/6 with lifelink. It's technically not that big, it's getting a buff. But it looks that big, doesn't it? I'm going to attack in the air with an 8/9. By the way, these creatures are tapped, so instead of having hexproof from Sereth's ability, they now have Death Touch. Something kind of fun you can do with Sereth and Katilda is, as long as your creature doesn't have Summoning Sickness, you can just tap it to give it Death Touch. Oh, it looks like they're swinging in. They're going to exile nothing from the graveyard. I'm going to block. So I'm going to choose to block with the Sun Gold Sentinel on Florian and the Intrepid Adversary on the Graveyard Trespasser. First strike damage resolves. Regular damage resolves. We end up gaining some life. They didn't really do any damage to me. And here comes Zeatora, the Incinerator. They could sacrifice one of these creatures, but it's not going to do that much because mine are just gigantic thanks to the Intrepid Adversary. And because these two still have hexproof, they can't kill them. That's going to be a good first game with Katilda. This opponent is playing Rafine, Scheming Seer. I'm going to keep this hand. Rafine is a conniving commander. This is a Sphinx demon who connives a target creature when you attack, conniving for however many attacking creatures you have. We're going to start out our game with the Blossoming Sands, gaining a life. We're at 26 life. That's more than our opponent. I'm going to say that means we're winning. I'm not really sure that's how that works, but I'm going to say that we're winning. The Ambitious Farmhand is going to hit the battlefield, and we're going to draw a Plains out of our deck. Very good. Always good to have more land in hand. And they're going to gain a life as well. Oh, we're tied. Well, not for long, though. I'm going to follow up with a Forest and play Briarbridge Tracker. This creature is a 4/3 so long as I have a token. And I do have a token because it comes with a clue, which I can sacrifice to draw a card. I also have to pay 2 mana, but the important thing is this is a 4/3. We've also hit them for 1 entire damage. I now have the life total lead. Looks like they're leaving open their mana, which makes me wonder if maybe they have a counter spell. So I'm not going to play anything before combat. I'm just going to go to attacks and swing in with both my creatures. For 3 mana, they could have played Rafine, but they didn't. Oh, Cathar Commando! Cathar Commando is a 3/1 with Flash. We have it on our deck, too. And they're going to block Briarbridge Tracker. That works for me. Now that they've tapped out, I'm going to play Augur of Autumn. I've already played a land for this turn, but that's still okay with me. We have an Iganjo on the top of our library, which we could have played. I was really hoping that that creature wouldn't die, and because it has Vigilance, I could have played Katilda and the Augur of Autumn. Kind of making a lot of use of things. Ooh, Obscure Charm's going to destroy the Augur before I can make use of it. That is quite okay. Since our opponent seems to be very interested in destroying things, I'm going to try to play Laid to Rest. Oh, but it was Spell Pierce. That's not going to resolve on the battlefield. This would have given me card draw if my humans died. And the farmhand swings in for 1 more damage, all of 1, and we have so many lands in hand. Wow, Ratadrabik! Ratadrabik is a cool new legend that makes your other legends come back if they die, but come back as zombies. A little gruesome. I'm going to play the Sanctuary Warden, and I'm going to take one of the shield counters off it to draw a card and make a token. Ratadrabik actually gives all of their zombies Vigilance. I don't know how many zombies they're going to have, other than the tokens that they make. Oh, Ratadrabik now has a good free attack here, since they've exiled Sanctuary Warden. But I think I've got to do some mana making, so I'm going to cast this at sorcery speed, the Cemetery Protector. And I'm going to exile their Cathar Commando from the graveyard. And then follow up by casting Katilda. Katilda's going to trigger this ability here and get me a human token. I really would like Katilda to land on the battlefield so I'll have 2 more mana to use. But they're going to make her disappear. She just is going to go to the graveyard. I will choose to put her back into the command zone, and I'll play my Radiant Grove since it comes in tapped. Kesa, Augur of Agonies, is going to gain them life and drain me for life whenever they draw a card, and conniving involves drawing cards. Let's play Katilda once again. Also, because Kesa is a legendary, it does get that extra layer of protection from Ratadrabik, meaning that if it dies, it will come back. Gonna build out even more tokens here. And I think I will exile the Obscure Charm from their graveyard. I'll go to combat, and I will sit here and do nothing. We do have we only have 2 different power levels on the board right now, so I can't activate the Ambitious Farmhand. We only have 1 power and 3 power. They've cast Resolute Reinforcements. Cool. And now Rafine! Now, if they want to attack with things, they can make one of their creatures stronger. Looks like that's what they're planning on doing, but before that Connive resolves, I'm going to use Iganjo to kill Kesa. They get a copy. Hello, fake Kesa. Zombie Kesa. And I'm going to use my remaining mana to crack this clue. Oh, Knight of Dawn's Light. Oh, an Averbrook Caretaker. Well, I'm definitely going to cast the Averbrook Caretaker. I'm going to see how much mana do I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Enough. I'm going to cast Knight of Dawn's Light. I'm putting everything on the battlefield. And then I'm going to sit here and do nothing. We're going to put 2 +1/+1 counters on. Eeny, meeny, miny. Knight of Dawn's Light because it has first strike. And I'm just setting up to activate Katilda's ability to put +1/+1 counters on all our creatures. Something kind of fun is because this is a werewolf, I can't actually target Katilda with its ability. I have nothing with reach and nothing with flying, so Rafine does swing in freely here. Draws and discards a single card for the Connive. And it was a land, so they don't get a +1/+1 counter. Let's see what they got. Is it something useful? Is it something scary? Will I get to put my +1/+1 counters on things? It's Obscura Interceptor! Just on the battlefield. There's no spells on the stack, so I think they were just trying to build up the board a little bit more. Or maybe they know that they're in danger. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I don't have any green mana left. Okay, so if I wanted to redo that turn, I would have had to tap some of these creatures, because this is not a human. I didn't recognize it. That's not a human. So I don't have enough green mana for that. Darn. But I can still activate this. Coven! Give you a little bit of extra life and also lifelink. Torrens is going to join the battle. Hello, Torrens. By the way, they also wanted to cast a spell that turn, because otherwise it would become Night, and Averbrook Caretaker would have been disgustingly good. I'm going to just activate Katilda now because I don't feel like doing math, and I'm going to press one of my favorite buttons, which is the Attack All button. I love spacebars. We're just attacking with a lot of stuff, and certainly I could have attacked with just the largest creatures or just the most protected creatures, but it's so much more fun to attack with everything. Especially when you're an aggressive deck like this and you just really want to deal damage. They're going to double block the Averbrook Caretaker. Smart idea. But can you afford to let all that other damage go through? Let's count up how much damage there is. We've got 6, 12. Nice. Plus 8, so that's 20. We've got 24. 29. 34 damage. Ooh, you're gonna have to block a lot. They do gain a little bit of life off the Obscura Interceptor, though. So they're not quite dead. They have 11 life left, but we have far more than 11 damage on our battlefield. They're swinging in with everything. This is going to give them the opportunity to look for a card that can save them, because they get to draw 3 and discard 3. They're keeping 1, but it might be the exact right card they need to get out of this situation. Also, they're going to gain some life. Just a little, off the clone of Kesa. I'll block the clone of Kesa. But no, that's going to be a victory for me and my many humans. Looks like we're going to have a green-white battle here with Selesnya versus Selesnya. Our opponent is running King Darian, and we are running Katilda. I'm going to keep this hand because it has good mana in it and a couple strong creatures, Planeswalkers, and a useful enchantment. King Darian, if you haven't seen it before, is going to make all of their creatures stronger, and it has an ability that can protect tokens. Start with our Blossoming Sands. I've gained 1 life. That puts me in the lead, 26 to 25. Also going to play another Plains and a Guardian of New Benalia. I've got lots of lands in my hand that I could discard if I need to protect the Guardian of New Benalia. On 3 mana, they could just play their commander. Is that what we're going to see? It's bigger than my Guardian, so I wouldn't be surprised. No, it's the Rumor Gatherer. Ooh. That's going to draw them cards if multiple creatures enter the battlefield under their control during a turn. Let's play a Forest, and I will play Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. This is going to get me 2 creatures entering the battlefield on my turn. We've got a 1/1 token from Adeline and the Guardian of Nubenalia. They're not interested in trying to block here, knowing that I could make this indestructible. Aryan Beast Caller. Whenever they cast a creature, it will get +1/+1. When it dies, it can move its +1/+1 counters onto another creature they control. And nice! So they're going to get a +1/+1 counter on this, and they're going to draw a card. Voice of the Blessed, by the way, is going to reward them for life gain. So if I see them about to gain life, I'm going to do my best to stop them. Very interesting. They did not attack in. So I'm going to take advantage of this to do my own attack. I'm going to go to combat, and I'm going to enlist with the Guardian of Nubenalia and attack with Adeline. I'm not attacking with the 1/1, but I am going to use it to make the Guardian 3 power. Rainy Grove and Cathar Commando. There's no enchantments or artifacts on the battlefield, and I don't really need another land, so I'm going to move both of those to the bottom. Now you may remember, I have the Wandering Emperor in hand. And on that double block, we're going to have a good time. The Wandering Emperor is flashed out, and we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Adeline to take these both down with first striking damage. That is such a lead that our opponent's going to concede. I'm going to make sure I get in one more game with this Katilda deck, so let's select it and play it again in the Brawl queue. The Brawl queue, by the way, is unranked, and I didn't mention this before, but there's no such thing as commander damage in this format. That probably doesn't mean anything to most of you, but if you happen to play Commander and you're wondering about Brawl, no, there's no commander damage in Brawl. And it looks like we have another opponent lined up here. And I do want to point something out. You get to see what your opponent's commander is at the start of the game. You can always click View Battlefield if you want to highlight their card, for example, Kodama of the West Tree, and go back to the browser when you're looking at your opening hand. This can be important when you're trying to decide which cards you want to keep or if you need to draw a new hand. I'm going to keep this. I have a lot of really strong 2-cost creatures, both colors of mana, and a really strong buff for all my humans. I'm going to start by playing the Plains. Kodama, by the way, is a way to ramp. This is mono green and it gets big fast. Oh, our opponent said hello! Let me play my Ambitious Farmhand and say hello back. Hello, Arias 9. I will search my library for a basic plant card. Thank you, Ambitious Farmhand. Now I have a Plains in hand, so I can continue to cast cards next turn. The Goshen Tie of Boundless Vigor. They don't have 1 mana, so they can't put a +1/+1 counter on it. But we can keep building up our board. I'm going to cast the Arcane Signet, and then Sun Gold Sentinel. I'm going to attack in with the Ambitious Farmhand, and I don't think they're going to block, because this creature is probably more valuable than the Ambitious Farmhand, at least for now. I have the ability to turn the Farmhand into a 3/3 with lifelink if I have Coven and enough mana to spare, which I think I will. I'm going to play a Forest, and then get my Commander out. Last game, I barely did anything with Katilda, but now she's on the battlefield, and she's going to let me generate so much mana. You know what I'm going to do with that mana? I'm going to go wild. Let's start with Sigarda. Sigarda is going to give all these humans +1/+1, and I'm just going to stay back here. I'm able to block very well, and I have a fun little interaction. This is a werewolf. This has protection from werewolves. It's not always relevant, but when it is, it feels really good. Okay, we have lots of mana, we have big creatures, we have Coven abilities we can activate. But I want my creatures to be bigger. So we're going to do the same thing as last game and cast Intrepid Adversary. And when it enters the battlefield, I'm going to pay, and then I'm going to pay again to make my creatures really big. And then I'm going to attack in with Sigarda. Just Sigarda. Sigarda, by the way, has flying. Kodama has reach. They could have blocked. They chose not to. That's probably a smart move. And I'm keeping back lots of blockers because I don't want them to ramp with Kodama. Dormant Grove. That's going to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature they control. They already have one creature with a +1/+1 counter. Those both count as modified for Kodama's ability, giving them trample, though they already both had trample. They have double trample now. That's nothing. And making it so if they were to deal damage to me as a player during combat, they would get a land. But that's not happening right now. We're just going to win by attacking in. Good game, Kodama. Our humans were too mighty for your branches. Remember, when you're building your first Brawl deck, there's a ton of different choices, so I hope that you get creative and have fun. You can also sometimes find decks online that other people have brewed using those commanders, and you can use those for inspiration. If you ever want to check out my decks, I have a lot of Brawl content over on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Amazonian. If you decide to come over, say hi! Let me know that you found me through this video. With so many different commanders to choose from, I hope you all have fun brewing and brawling.